To draft a basic skirt block, we need 4 measurements: waist circumference, full hip circumference, bust point distance, full hip depth. I am drafting this pattern in a size 38, but I will include the measurements for the other sizes in the description. First, we need to draw a rectangle. Starting 3 to 4 centimeters down from the top edge of the paper, draw a horizontal line. This is the waistline. I am using a skirt length of 54 centimeters, which falls just below the knee. From both ends of the waistline, measure down 54 centimeters and draw another horizontal line. This is the hemline. From the waistline, measure down the full hip depth, mark both sides, and draw a horizontal line across. This is the full hip line. For people who are between 160 and 170 centimeters tall, the standard full hip depth is 20 centimeters. However, keep in mind that when drafting patterns, the minimum full hip depth is 18 centimeters and the maximum is 22 centimeters. Now, on the waistline, measure 1/2 of the full hip circumference plus 5 to 6 centimeters and mark the points. Mark the same measurement on the hemline as well. From the waistline, measure down 1/2 of the full hip depth on both sides and draw a horizontal line. This is the high hip line. On the right side of the pattern, extend 3 centimeters beyond the rectangle from the bottom edge to create the zipper extension, and continue this extension up to the full hip line. The right side of the pattern is the center back, CB, and the left side is the center front, CF. Starting from the CB on the waistline, measure 1/4 of the full hip circumference minus 1 centimeter toward the left and mark the point. Mark the same measurement on the hemline. Connect these 2 points with a straight line. This is the backside seam. Now, from the backside seam on the waistline, measure a fixed 3.5 centimeters inward toward the right and mark the point. From this point, measure up 1 centimeter. Using a French curve, connect this point to the full hip line. Now, to eliminate the waist gap at the center back and make the skirt fit the body better, measure 1.5 centimeters to the left from the corner of the pattern on the waistline and mark the point. Connect this point to the full hip line. Now, measure the distance between the 2 dart positions along the waistline and subtract 1/4 of the waist circumference minus 1 centimeter. Whatever remains will be the total dart intake. To create the center back dart, starting from the corner of the pattern after the 1.5 centimeter adjustment, measure 1/2 of the bust point distance toward the left and mark the point. Now divide the dart intake in half and mark that amount on each side of this point. In this pattern, the dart intake is 1 centimeter. So, measure 1/2 centimeter on each side of the center point and mark both points. Draw a perpendicular line from the center of the dart down to the full hip line. Then connect both dart legs to a point that is 2 centimeters below the high hip line. Now blend the waistline at the side seam into the center of the dart with a smooth curve. At the center back, draw a line 3 centimeters away from the CB dart line, parallel to it, and extend it upward. To prevent the seam from showing after sewing, square off the top corner of the pattern by creating a right angle, just as shown in the video. The back pattern is now complete. Now let's move on to the front pattern. Starting from the upper left corner of the pattern on the waistline, measure 1/4 of the full hip circumference plus 1 centimeter toward the right and mark the point. Mark the same measurement on the hemline, then connect the 2 points with a straight line. This is the front side seam. From the front side seam on the waistline, measure a fixed 3.5 centimeters inward. From this point, measure up 1 centimeter, then connect this point to the full hip line with a smooth curve. Measure the distance from the corner of the pattern to the side dart position. Subtract 1/4 of the waist circumference plus 1 centimeter from this measurement. The remaining amount is the dart intake. Just as you did for the back pattern, starting from the corner of the pattern, measure 1/2 of the bust point distance toward the right and mark the points. Keep in mind that the dart intake should never be more than 3.5 centimeters. Then divide the dart intake in half and mark 1/2 of the dart intake on each side of this point. Draw a perpendicular line from the center of the dart down to the full hip line, then connect both dart legs to the high hip line. Now blend the waistline at the side seam into the center of the dart with a smooth curve. And that's the front skirt pattern. This pattern is the foundation for drafting every skirt style. Once you learn this basic pattern, you'll be able to draft any other skirt design. There are a few important tips for sewing the skirt that I'll definitely cover in a separate video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below.